All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to a Value Conversation, your next spoken word. So I just did a test stream a moment ago just to make sure everything was all right with the sound. So it looks like we're good here. So give it a minute here. We should start getting some stats going. Uh, Chat is still looking to connect, but it'll probably connect in a minute. So we'll just go ahead and keep rolling right about now. So first off, anybody who's up right about now, thanks for checking this out. If not, as always, we'll see the replay. Now, just to let you know here in the future, what's probably going to happen is I may do a few more shows that are going to be pre-recorded. So if I'm going to do the pre-records, well, obviously we're not going to see a lot of the lives anymore, especially not around 10 o'clock and not any later. So I'm going to try and make sure I do that sooner in the future. All right. So work with me on that. So hold up for a second here, folks. Need to go ahead and make sure that I get this stream out to Fatty so he can push this out to a few more folks. Stand by for a second. All right, the link is underway. So for some of you who may be joining a little bit late, hopefully the link can get out to you in time. But as always, you've got the replay to check it out. Let me do one more thing. Let me get the chat panel up here. Let's also get the chat in. Yep, that is my stream. All right, there we go. All right. So again, we had Fatty's 2-year anniversary last night. And based on that, Fatty covered a lot of topics. But of course, the biggest thing yesterday was the blow up in the Oval Office with Zelensky, Trump, and Vance. So in the end, what we all could agree on is that it was a bully move that Vance and Trump had pulled on Zelensky. No way in shape or form should a president of a sovereign country be put in a situation where you've got the president and vice president of the United States attempting to put a sovereign president on their lap and treat him like a ventriloquist dummy. So basically, you're going to carve up 90% of this man's country, give it away to Russia, and then maybe leave a percentage for him, but then tell him, okay, this is the best negotiation we can do. That's not a negotiation. That's a fire sale of my property. But nonetheless, we saw how that turned out. We as a nation, being America, have damaged our credibility based upon those two yahoos in there. Now, one of the other things that I caught that really ticked me off that Vance tried to play here was stating that Zelensky was sending people who had been conscripted to the front line. Well, of course he was, because conscription is more or less a draft. Now, what Vance was being dishonest about is that conscription had played a large part of what we did in America up until where we are right now, from 1776 all the way up to this moment in time. So think about again, conscript meaning the draft. So there was conscript that America was responsible for using as well for World War One, World War Two, the Korean War, Vietnam, just to name a few. I'm sure we also had this for the 1776 Revolutionary War as well. So the use of conscripts is nothing nefarious that J.D. Vance tried to make it out as being. Conscript was just another way of saying draft, and that is something that's been used in the U.S. also that was disbanded in 1974, I want to say. But we still have selective service that when young men reach the age of 18, they are still required to sign up for in the event that a draft is needed. So that was misinformation, which shows the integrity or the lack thereof of this administration. Moving on. All right, so let's take a look here at 3 lies that I'd like to address today. The first lie that was voted on the panel and down in the chat is that Zelensky is a billionaire. All right, that is anything further from the truth. Zelensky is not a billionaire, but that lie was perpetuated in the in the chat and also on the panel. So as you know, I provided fact checking in the last video I did, which was called Fact Checked 101. Now here in Fact Check 102, which is what I'm naming this video, I've also gone ahead and provided the facts inside of the description. So if anyone has any questions about what I'm doing, or if you want to even fact check me, take a look inside of the description and you'll find that information. So this is an old lie here that is finding new life again. So it's making it around the world here that Zelensky supposedly is a billionaire. For example, one widely shared screenshot reads, Zelensky has $1.4 billion, more than Will Smith, Chris Rock, and Dave Chappelle combined. We are to believe that he made that as a comedian in the poorest nation in Europe. Now, Reuters has not independently verified Zelensky's wealth. Now, this statement doesn't mean that he's not a billionaire, because he's not a billionaire. What they're saying is they do not know exactly how much how much he is worth. However, there is no evidence that the Ukrainian leader is a billionaire, according to publicly available official figures and representatives of business publisher Forbes, who spoke to Reuters. Now, this lie is just on fire again, but just to make this easier, I went out and did a quick search and I just typed in the subject of this particular fact check, and I got a lot of answers coming back here from other organizations who could also verify that Zelensky is not a billionaire. Stand by for a second, folks. Just taking a second to hit Fatty up again. Link to your email. Excuse me. All right. So I just went out to Google and I typed in no evidence Ukrainian President Zelensky is a billionaire. So we see there's Reuters saying that there's no evidence, but there's also DW, there's USA Today, Forbes, AFP Fact Check. So you can see clearly here that there's nothing supporting this lie that Zelensky is a billionaire. But as always, I noticed that it's quite prevalent that people will either come up on the panel, make statements, and say what the statistics say, or, well, it's been reported that he's a billionaire. And look at how we're giving all this money to Ukraine, but we're not doing anything for our homeless. Well, think about this. Do the homeless inside the United States need tanks? Do they need landmines to be planted? Do they need rockets, missiles? No, they don't need any of that. So there's always this deflection to the most extreme when making the comparison. Why are we giving all this money to Ukraine? Because of the fact we're trying to make sure that our alliances that we keep with folks out here are maintained. Hey, what's going on, E-Black? Hey, Matt, no offense here. No hate to anyone. We all get passionate about what we want to speak about. So all good here with me, man. It's nothing more than a debate. There's no hate that's going back towards anyone. We're just having a conversation because when it's all over, it's on to the next topic. But hey, glad you stopped by. All right. So moving on, as I'm saying here, excuse me, there is nothing that substantiates a lot of this conjecture that pops up on the panel or even in the chat. So my answer to most of these folks is that if you have any issue with what I'm saying, by all means, fact check it. As I've said before, if you take the time to look in the description, I have provided enough information that if you want to fact check what I say, what anybody on the panel says, or anything that comes out in the news, you have the ability to do so right now. So, three things I need folks to understand. Number one, facts don't care about hairlines. I don't know why my hairline is always a part of the topic, but so be it. Second thing, facts are not afraid of the truth. Just dead simple. No better way to put that. If you're telling the truth, the facts will more or less be on your side. And the third thing, facts do not pick sides. It's either the truth or it's going to be a lie. But nonetheless, you got to be able to find out where to look for the truth. And I want to believe that what I provided folks will actually be used. Use it if you need to know. Now, just to step a little bit further back into this, again, shortly after this article was done back in, I want to say it was 2022, they first did it. Well, back in March of 2024, there was information pertaining to Zelensky's income because he actually reported it. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Friday declared his income for 2022 rose to 12.42 million hryvnias, which is $306,000 in US currency, obviously, from 3.7 million hryvnias the previous year, with the increase attributable to improved rent collection and sale of some government bonds. A sale on the president's website said most of the income of the president and his family came from his salary, bank interest, and rent payable from his properties. So, with that being said, we can see that he is not a billionaire. So, let's put that to the side as of right now. There's no truth in it. So, lie number one debunked. Let's move on. So we are seeing now here that Putin is once again claiming that it's NATO's fault why he had to start the war here because NATO was infringing on Russian territory. Okay, that is not true. Now you're hearing me say it's not true, but I'm going to go ahead and walk you guys through why it isn't because I brought up a few articles that you can cross-reference for yourselves. Now, before we do that, I want to introduce another agency, or actually two agencies, if some of you are not familiar here, that NATO is not the only organization working overseas to make sure that we have some type of global coalition. So up here we have the Atlantic Council. So I'm just going to zip over here to where it says about, and we'll go to about the Atlantic Council. And I'll just give you a quick rundown. Driven by our mission of shaping the global future together, the Atlantic Council is a nonpartisan organization that galvanizes U.S. leadership and engagement in the world in partnership with allies and partners to shape solutions to global challenges. So there's a little more information about them, but I'll just go ahead and read this part. But you can pretty much see for yourselves where you can go if you want to see anything additional about this. The Atlantic Council promotes constructive leadership and engagement in internal affairs based on the Atlantic community's central role in meeting global challenges. The Council provides an essential forum for navigating the dramatic economic and political changes defining the 21st century by informing and galvanizing its uniquely influential network of global leaders. Again, they work worldwide with leaders in different countries. The Atlantic Council, through the papers it publishes, the ideas it generates, the future leaders it develops, and the communities it builds, shapes policy choices and strategies to create a more free, secure, and prosperous world. So ask yourselves, what's wrong with that? How is that a problem if we're trying to create, as they said, a more free, secure, and prosperous world by working with our global allies? Ukraine happening to be one of them. So why is there such an issue with the Trump administration trying to label Ukraine as an aggressor? Worse yet, people who support Russia, who are actually Americans, trying to list Ukraine as an aggressor, blaming them for the war. Makes no sense whatsoever. But this is an agency that is trying to work towards making sure that there is a global alliance that they are a part of, that we as Americans participate in. All right, good on the Atlantic Council. So getting back to what I'm saying here is that we once again have Puto, Putin claiming that NATO is responsible for the war. As speculation swirls over the possible terms of a U.S. brokered peace deal to end the Russo-Ukrainian war, the Kremlin is insisting that above all else, the future Ukraine must be neutral and demilitarized. Now, I want you to keep this in mind here, neutral and demilitarized. Now, unbeknownst to folks who have not been keeping up with a lot of activity with Ukraine going back 20 or 30 years, Ukraine was a part of the Budapest Memorandum. Now, recall this, if not, I mentioned the Budapest Memorandum last night because Fantastic, again, who I love the brother to death. Again, I have no smoke with Fantastic. Matter of fact, let me take a sidebar for a second. So again, Fantastic and I have known each other for about maybe a year or so. We've only met on the panels. We haven't met each other directly for the most part, but understand that there's no smoke or animosity that I have for him. I have an issue with the misleading information that he tends to put out here. Now, I don't think he does it on purpose, but it may come from where he draws this information from to include also his political leanings. He leans black conservative, MAGA support left. I lean more on, excuse me, as you were on the right side. I'm sorry. Uh, Fantastic is a conservative who supports Donald Trump. I'm on the left hand side of the things. I do not support Donald Trump. But at the same time, as I said before, facts don't care about feelings. They don't care about my hairline. They don't choose sides. So that's the one area that I want to make known of. All right. So when Fantastic said, here's one of the things that bothers me about John, or something along those lines, I could only listen to that and realize that, okay, you're getting ready to say something that I can disprove, which means that you haven't done your homework properly. So again, there's no smoke, no animosity thrown towards them. We just happen to be peers in this environment who debate on information. One of us is right, one of us is going to be wrong. Sometimes we'll meet in the middle. But on this issue regarding NATO, Russia has been the aggressor from the very beginning. So let's not let that get away. Excuse me. All right. So going back to this, again, Russia wants Ukraine to be neutral and demilitarized. This is nothing new. Vladimir Putin has been citing Ukraine's demilitarization as his key war aim since the very first morning of the invasion. Demilitarization also featured prominently in a board of peace talks held during the initial weeks of the war, with Russian representatives demanding an approximately 95% reduction in the size of Ukraine's army, which has to become a skeleton force of just 50,000 folks. Now, let's think about this. If you had somebody roll into your front yard, knock on your door, and say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and take over your property. Matter of fact, I'm going to take over your property, and anybody in the house is going to be a war prisoner. There's nothing you have to say about it. Now, that's what I'm going to do to you. Or I tell you what, I'll go back to my side of the street and I'll let you think over the terms I've given you. All right. So I'm give you about 5 minutes. So I'll be right back. But make sure that you think this through thoroughly. What are you going to do? Are you going to fight? So anyone who is an aggressor in your country, especially since they've already proven that you can't trust them, who is now starting a war with you after annexing a portion of your country, we're going back to 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea. Do you really think that someone that you're going to have any conversation that is going to be fruitful? You want me to reduce my force by almost 90%, and then you're still going to attack me with no assurances? No, we're not even doing this. So again, Russia has always been the aggressor. But let's go ahead and pull up. Let's go to the next tab that I have open. And before I read this, let me introduce you to the American Foreign Service Association. Again, NATO is not the only body out here that is working to make sure that Ukraine's position, their sovereignty, is maintained. So let's hit this about AFSA. So who we serve? But actually, let's do this instead. Let's go to the about here. The American Foreign Service Association, established in 1924. Now, notice that is before NATO. NATO was established, I want to say, the 4th of April, 1949. We can verify that, but nonetheless, this agency is older than NATO. The American Foreign Service Association, established in 1924, is both a professional association and exclusive representative for the U.S. Foreign Service. AFSA's close to 16,800 members include active duty and retired members of the Foreign Service. At the Department of State, the U.S. Agency for International Development, take a look at that. USAID. We're going to have a fact check about them as well down the road. Foreign Commercial Service, Foreign Agricultural Service, Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, and U.S. Agency for Global Media. AFSA is both the principal advocate for the long-term institutional well-being of the professional career foreign service and responsible for safeguarding the interests of AFSA members. AFSA also seeks to increase understanding among the American people about the vital role of the U.S. Foreign Service in sustaining American global leadership. All right, so there you have it again. You have another agency that's working to ensure that there is global coalition and collaboration being fostered by the United States. Again, why is this such an issue with the current administration for us to participate in being a part of a global community for health, for education, for the welfare of all citizens? This is an investment that we make because, as I mentioned before on the panel, the investment works better if we have, instead of America just looking for a cure for, all of a sudden I've got a lash in my eye. What in the hell? All right, let's take 3. Instead of America being the only country trying to figure out a solution for, I don't know, we'll just say AIDS or for COVID or something along those lines. Instead of having just one country do it, why would it be such a problem if we have over 50 to 80 or 100 countries looking at the same problem as well? That works in everybody's interest. So again, a global coalition is something that is for the benefit of the U.S. as well as anybody else that we partner with. All right, so going back to this, did NATO expansion really cause Putin's invasion? So a lot of the trash that you heard on the panel here that was coming up was mainly folks who were taking opinions from what I believe and what sounded like talking points from right-wing media. Now, the thing that people fail to do is to verify whether or not who they're getting their information from is actually credible. So what I may do is take a moment here and I'll demonstrate once more how I come across getting the facts here. Let's go straight to the issue of NATO expansion here. 23 years later, President Putin has made Ukraine's preliminary steps to joining NATO the principal grounds for the Russian invasion of February 24, 2022. The alliance's leaders have always made it clear that it is up to each European country to make its own decision about membership. So therefore, you see, America has nothing to do with this. This is simply a decision that the European countries who want to be of NATO come to the decision that, hey, we want to join. NATO gives you, or here's what you need to meet as far as the preliminaries. And if the country meets that, a vote is taken, then they can be a part of NATO. Now, that sounds real to the point, kind of quick and succinct on my statement, but that's just a general overview. If you need to know more about that, all you need to do is go to NATO's page, and they will give you information regarding the requirements for becoming a NATO member. But the eastward expansion of NATO particularly inflamed Putin, who has claimed that Secretary of State James Baker and other Western leaders assured Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev in 1990, at the time a unified Germany joined NATO, that the alliance would expand not 1 inch eastward. That was a lie. And I believe that's what caught my attention when Fantastic brought my name up. There's been nothing that has been put in paper. There's nothing written anywhere, policy or law, stating as such what Putin has said. Matter of fact, it was nothing but hearsay that was never again captured in writing. Mikhail Gorbachev even was up for the expansion of NATO. But you do not see that or hear that discussed in right wing areas because it doesn't support the talking point that helps Vladimir Putin. Let's continue. George Kennan would surely have understood Putin's reaction. The architect of the containment policy toward the Soviet Union wrote in 1997, again, this is his professional opinion, that expanding NATO would be the most faithful era of American policy in the entire post Cold War era. Kennan continued, such a decision may be expected to inflame the nationalistic, anti Western, and militaristic tendencies in Russian opinion, to have an adverse effect on the development of Russian democracy, to restore the atmosphere of the Cold War to East West relations, and to impel Russian foreign policy in directions decidedly not to our liking. Now, I can see where people listening to this will try to say, see, told you so. It's our fault that Russia attacked. What people seem to throw out of the window when they hear something like this is also you've got to understand who you're dealing with. So let's say the question is that if you will jump in the ocean and you start bleeding, even though you supposedly have had a conversation with sharks about biting, you tell them, well, you guys should not bite based upon the policy that we have in place. Now, I'm being hyperbolic and ridiculous right now, but what I want to get to is a shark still going to bite you whether you're bleeding or not? Chances are yes. So, what I'm saying here is Putin was always going to be who he is. So, whether anything is written or not, he was going to do what he's done. And there's always more proof to show this, which I will. Kennan never convinced President Bill Clinton or his Russia advisor, Strobe Talbot. And they're saying convinced him of the speech that we just read above here. And the remarks of Secretary Baker or NATO leaders could be discounted because they were never part of a treaty or formal agreement. Just as I said, there was nothing that substantiated what Putin was trying to say, which is, there's a conversation, there was an agreement. Nothing has ever been stated above that. But Putin nevertheless claims that the West betrayed Russia in the post Soviet period because much of Eastern Europe, in fact, joined NATO. Now, recall up here where I just read this. The alliance's leaders have always made it clear that it is up to each European country to make its own decision about the membership. So, Putin crying about these folks joining the NATO alliance, America had nothing to do with that. This was a decision solely by those countries that NATO took into account and other NATO members took into account before agreeing to make these countries a part of NATO. So Putin is just wolfing at this point. But Putin nevertheless claims that the West betrayed Russia in the post Soviet period because much of Eastern Europe, in fact, joined NATO. And this is at least part of what motivates his aggression now. Now, here's where I want everyone to pay attention here. This is what I mentioned to Fantastic last night. And funny enough, this is what's gaining some honorable mentions again. And again, this is the Budapest Memorandum on Security Assurances, which was signed in 1994. In any case, this putative betrayal does not carry the weight of a violation of a formal agreement, a violation of which Putin himself is guilty. And again, they're speaking of formal agreements that he has violated. By signing the Budapest Memorandum on Security Assurances in 1994, The Russian Federation, now I'll say this again, the Russian Federation promised not to threaten or use military or economic coercion against Ukraine, Belarus, and Kazakhstan. As a result of this and other agreements, Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons and acceded to the Non Proliferation Treaty as a non nuclear state. It is now paying the price for trusting Russia to honor its international commitments. So from here on forth, I don't want to hear a damn word if I get up on a panel and there's conversation about, oh, NATO is the reason that Russia attacked, or Ukraine attacked Russia. Bullseye. I just read to everyone that NATO had nothing to do with the incursion of Putin. Putin was always going to do that. Putin took it upon himself to do so. Russia has always been the aggressor. Here, let's go a little bit further into this. So somewhere during the course of Fatty's show last night, I can't recall who I was going back and forth with, but there were so many of them, right? I want to say it was either I'm him or it might have been Anton Chigurh, whatever the hell his last name is. We'll just call him Anton right now. All right, not to be confused with Anton Daniels, but Anton actually went out and found this article and attempted to post this in his defense of saying that NATO is responsible for Russia's attack. But before we get into that, let me just read something ahead to you, folks. The controversy regarding the legitimacy of eastward NATO expansion relates to the aftermath of the revolutions of 1989, when the fall of Soviet allied communist states to opposition parties brought European spheres of influence into question. Now, I can speak about that because I was actually there in 1989 and then back in 1990 for the reunification of East and West Germany. Russian authorities claim that agreement on non expansion of NATO to Eastern Europe took place orally, and the alliance violated it with its expansion, while the leaders of the alliance claim that no such promise was made and that such a decision could only be made in writing. So here we go with the cross referencing again. Now, notice I just mentioned that in the previous article on the AFSA page. I made the statement that Putin tried to say that there was an agreement that was in place and that NATO and America, through proxy, had violated said agreement. No agreement was put in place, and through, again, cross referencing from this article, you can see here, as it's stated, that there was nothing that was ever made. Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev, who participated in the 1990 negotiations, subsequently spoke out about the existence of a guarantee of non expansion of NATO to the East inconsistently. Very important that this word is seen, confirming its existence in some interviews and refuting in others. Among academic researchers, opinions on the existence or absence of a non extension agreement also differ. So, as I was saying, there is nothing that has ever been put in place to actually determine on whether or not this agreement was ever a real thing. But in actuality, as has been stated, no, it is not. There's nothing that's been written that will even support that. Now, just for a little extra context here. So, this is what I saw that I'm him or Anton tried to post, and then they retracted. The reason why they retracted is I made statement that a proposal to expand is not the same thing as saying we want to expand or we are going to expand. And I think that's what he caught right before he pulled it out of the chat. But hey, I already saw it. And when I did, I came directly to this page. The proposal to not expand NATO eastward, which was one of the ways Western countries took the initiative on the issue of German reunification and reducing the possibility of the Soviet Union's influence on the process, was based on the provisions of the speech of German Foreign Minister Hans Dietrich Geinster in Tutzig announced on January 31st, 1990. So there was nothing that was ever written. The belief that there was some type of agreement in place had come from the provisions or the statements inside of a speech, nothing more. There was nothing that was ever put into writing saying that NATO would not expand forward. So again, no truth here, but let's keep going. In it, the minister, among other things, called on NATO to unequivocally state no matter what happens in the Warsaw Pact countries, there will be no expansion of NATO territory to the east that is closer to the borders of the Soviet Union. Geiger's speech was prepared by him without coordination with the German Chancellor Helmut Kohl, to whom he was a political competitor on the eve of the upcoming parliamentary elections, and from whom he sought to seize the laurels of the unifier of Germany. At the same time, his proposals aroused interest among the leadership of Western countries, which began to consider the possibility of obtaining the consent of the USSR to the unification of Germany in exchange to limit the expansion of NATO. On February 2, the minister outlined his plan to U.S. Secretary of State James Baker, and on February 6 to British Foreign Minister Douglas Hurd. Geiger explained that the proposed restriction would be applicable to both the GDR and Eastern European countries. 10 days after his speech in Tutsik, Geiger repeated his words in an interview with the Soviet Foreign Minister Eduard Shevardnadze. It is clear to us that membership in NATO creates difficult problems. However, one thing is clear to us: NATO will not expand to the east. 2 days later, Geiger repeats the statement at a press conference with Baker in Washington. As I said, NATO has no intentions of expanding to the east. All right, so as you can see here, this again was a speech. This was nothing that was assured. This was nothing that was promised. This was actually from a guy who seems as if he was wanting to get in bed with Russia. He was ready to side with Russia. However, when Helmut Kohl took over, it was a different thing. Helmut said, boom, he put the kibosh on that. There will be nothing of the sorts. Otherwise, had there been the case, we would have seen a different NATO. So we know for a fact, as I said before, this statement that was put together, and again, this was not run by Helmut Kohl, but this was Geithner's speech that was put together for him. This was a proposal. That's all it was. It was words and provisions from his speech that, again, Helmut Kohl did not have a chance to see and say, oh, absolutely not. We're not doing this. But in the end, it did not come to fruition. So, number two, lie debunked. Russia attacked Ukraine. Russia claimed that there was an agreement that NATO would not expand. No agreement exists, never has. All right, so this here is the Budapest Memorandum on Security Assurances that I spoke of that was signed on the 5th of December, 1994. The Budapest Memorandum on Security Assurances comprises four substantially identical political agreements signed at the OSCE conference in Budapest, Hungary on 5 December 1994 to provide security assurances by signatories relating to the accession of Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Ukraine to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. The four memoranda were originally signed by the four nuclear powers: Russia, the United States, the United Kingdom, and France. China gave somewhat weaker individual assurances in separate documents. So again, feel free to read through here. Information that's pertained. Here's the website. But one thing I just want to make clear here, so we can go ahead and move on to the next topic, because I want to try and keep this at least an hour or under. Russia breached the Budapest Memorandum in 2014 with its annexation of Ukraine's Crimea. Now, recall how we talked about in a previous tab here that Russia was one to break agreements, or they have broken agreements. This is the primary agreement here that we need to keep in mind, that Russia is going to be the aggressor, or has been and will always be the aggressor. Putin was always going to do what he was going to do. Now, the war itself that started back in 2022, the main reason that Putin had to go ahead and go forth with that is because he knew that if he didn't get himself solidly and in place in Ukraine, it was going to be hell to try and do this after the Biden administration had taken full control of the government and resources. He was not going to be able to do that. Whereas if Trump had won, he could take his time because he knew that Trump would not interfere. So when people say that, oh, there were no wars under Trump, the reason why there were no wars under Trump, even though there were some skirmishes, is because of the fact that Trump was on board with all the dictators. So no one had to have any fear about going to war or anything happening uh, and not having the United States getting involved with that because Trump had sided with all the dictators. People seem to forget that one particular fact. All right, keep that in mind. As a response, the US, UK, and France provided Ukraine with financial and military assistance and imposed economic sanctions on Russia while ruling out any direct interventions to avoid a direct confrontation with Russia. So we know what happened here. Russia pretty much took over Crimea, and this was shortly after Russia had annexed areas or actually gone to war with Georgia back in 2008. So let's stop all the nonsense that, oh, NATO is to blame for the war in Ukraine. Putin wants to reunify Russia. He wants the USSR back in effect. And that's what he's going to continue doing here. And unfortunately, by America taking the position that we have as of late, we are no longer a reliable ally. If we were to look at this from being outside of America, if we were any of the other countries that have been allies with us up until this point. What is this? Hold on for a second, folks. Need to get this. All right. Sorry about that. Hey, Life of Cash, thank you for jumping in, man. I appreciate it. I'm sorry that I looked up here a little bit late, so I hope you don't mind me giving you a shout out right about now. Thanks for dropping by. So, one other thing to add here. So we've got Declassified UK. So this is one of many publications worldwide that is recognized by fact checkers as providing information that is, if not high, it is mostly high as far as its credibility. So I'll go ahead. I think here at the end, I may run through one more time for those of you who did not see me provide the fact checking in real time. So I'll go ahead and show you guys how to come about getting your facts together and how to more or less suss out, as the English would say, what's true and what isn't. But we'll go through that in a moment, probably here in the end. But understand right now that the Classified UK is one of the trusted entities who had this to say. Boris Yeltsin privately supported NATO expansion in the 1990s. The classified British files show how Russia's president repeatedly told his Western counterparts he was not against NATO expansion and even devised a flagship argument with NATO to bring the Russian people on side. Now, you know damn well that's something that will get you dead with Putin. Now, Putin didn't come to power until the end of 99, 2000. So he was still, I guess, maybe a part of the KGB at this point in time, but he hadn't really made his rounds to get to where he had been. Otherwise, we would have seen some type of instance of disappearance of something with Yeltsin. Let's continue on. Now, rather than me read the entire article, I'm just going to pull out some of the points here that we can take a look at. Yeltsin said privately in 1993, Russia had no objection to Poland and Czech Republic joining NATO. Now, keep in mind now, this is around the same time where there was the Budapest Memorandum that we just finished reading. Also, keep in mind here that this was the time where it was written where Putin said that, hey, there was an agreement that was made. And of course, we saw where it was some hemming and hawing coming from Yeltsin. Yes, there was this discussion. No, there was this discussion. But it was definitively stated here that at the end of everything, he was for expansion of NATO. The comments, which had not been agreed beforehand, disconcerted the Russian delegation. So just the same as with the speech by Genscher, the German that we saw in the previous tab had made without running it by Helmut Kohl, Boris made these same similar statements without talking to his people. The following year, I guess that should be 94. I think that's when John Major became the prime minister. I was actually stationed overseas back then. The following year, Yeltsin told Prime Minister John Major he was not against NATO expansion, provided it was done gradually. Yeltsin was even keen to attend the 1997 NATO summit in Madrid when the first post-Soviet expansion was announced. But Yeltsin's Prime Minister Viktor Chermyrdin gave Major a different view in 1996, saying NATO expansion would create a fragile situation which could explode across Europe. Russia was not an enemy now, but could become one, Chermyrdin warned. Wow. No surprise that you would have that type of conversation. We are not your enemy, comrade, but we could be. So be it. But be things as they may, Boris Yeltsin was all for it, but the hardliners who wanted Russia to go back to its former glory would have nothing to do with it. So the talk of Russia being one to help ease other countries into NATO, it never came to be. It was never going to be because, again, Putin was on his way up to the rise, to the top of the ranks. And in 2000, when he was first introduced, it was clear through rumblings that he was not going to stand for any type of expansion if he could help it. And he was for bringing Russia back to his former glory. Let's continue. So that was, again, the second lie debunked. Russia has always been the aggressor. Russia broke the accords made by the 1993 Budapest Memorandum. They are the aggressors. All right, the third lie that was surfacing above water and then just swimming all over the place was that U.S. aid had paid millions to celebrities to go to Ukraine. All right, so we have PolitiFact here first. So as you can see here, this is a pants on fire lie. Nothing in the truth supports that. So they briefly came out and said, no, you said didn't pay Hollywood actors millions of dollars to visit Ukraine. So here's just a quick breakdown that you can go through. Oh my gosh. So this is just one place that you can find this information on. So just to show you that I'm not being biased and picking the first thing that I see, we have Reuters. Now, once again, we're going to do a quick check here of my fact checkers, just so people understand where my information comes from. Yes, entertainment must be entertainment news. We'll say entertainment news or e-news did not report that USAID sponsors celebrity visits to Ukraine. And again, Reuters fact check. Now, Reuters sits right in the middle if you go to organizations to gauge what type of fact checking they do. They are considered to be least biased or middle or even center. Now, this came out back in, take it back, excuse me. This came back a couple of weeks ago. A fabricated entertainment news report said that U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, now remember now, this is where funding has been cut. This is where all the lies can be checked down to for articles such as this that had to go ahead and debunk the lies being stated. Paid for trips by Hollywood stars to Ukraine after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The media outlet and representatives of two celebrities named in the report have said it is fake. President Donald Trump's administration has pursued plans to dismantle U.S. aid and freeze foreign aid. Trump made the unsubstantiated claim. Now, notice here's a hyperlink. If you want to, you can travel there and see for yourself that billions of dollars were stolen at the aid agency and that some was used to pay for positive media coverage for his Democratic opponents. News outlets have rejected Trump's accusations. This dude can tell a lie faster than he can a truth. Oh, but we're not done yet. Let's go one more again. Or actually, you know what? Yeah, I think this is some of my honorable mentions. Let me back up here for a second. So these are just a couple of the agencies, just a few folks that I pulled out here to show that, again, this was nothing more than a lie being told. There was nothing that had ever been substantiated about actors being paid to go to Ukraine. But on the panel last night on Fanny's show and in the chat, there were people swearing vehemently, "Oh yeah, look at all the money that we gave to these Hollywood actors to go over to Ukraine." Everyone who made statements that I'm speaking of right now never once provided anything to substantiate what they were saying. It was one bit of misinformation after the other. And pretty soon you had 3 or 4 people who were sitting here circulating the same lies, whether it be Rainbow Kid, whether it was Anton, whether it was I'm him. Hell, even Red Pill Ranger got into it. And then I want to say Studio Mansion also jumped in, and also each of them running the same lie or backing each other's lies up, but never providing any facts. I provided facts yesterday, and I got facts right now. Again, facts are not scared of the truth, and facts do not choose sides. All right, so with that said, there are a couple of honorable mentions that I want to throw in here. Now, the first honorable mention is when it was either last night or it may have been earlier in the week here, where the claim was made that there was $50 million worth of condoms sent to Gaza. Trump's White House press secretary claimed millions of taxpayer dollars were spent to fund condoms in Gaza. Now, again, Snopes is another bona fide fact checker. On January 28, 2025, side note, many people have forgotten on January 28, 1986, that's when the Challenger space shuttle exploded. Notice that news of that tragedy in space was never really broadcast, which means it's becoming less and less relevant. That's probably what's going to become the same of a lot of what we're reading right now, but I digress. On January 28, 2025, U.S. President Donald Trump's White House press secretary, Carolyn Levitt, claimed that the administration had just stopped millions of dollars in funding for condoms in Gaza. Calling the expense a waste of taxpayer funds, it was one example Levitt gave of the benefits of Trump's temporary pause on foreign aid, grants, and loans, which included funds for the World Health Organization. Per the White House transcript, Levitt said, the Department of Government Efficiency, aka DOGE, and the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, also found that there was about to be 50 million taxpayer dollars that went out the door to fund condoms in Gaza. That is a preposterous waste of taxpayer money. Numerous Snopes readers asked us if the U.S. government had indeed planned to spend 50 million on condoms for Gaza. The story spread far and wide, amplified by tech entrepreneur and Doge appointee Elon Musk, aka primary spreader of misinformation, per his own AI named Grok, who shared a clip of Levitt making the statement with the caption, "Tip of the iceberg." Now, here's the main thing I want people to focus on, and we'll just leave it here. Levitt offered no evidence to back up her claim. We looked through documents detailing funds spent on contraceptives and family planning initiatives by the U.S. Agency for International Development and found no evidence that tens of millions of dollars were earmarked for condoms in Gaza. We regard the claim as unproven. People, you have got to do a better job on who you let tell you this type of stuff. We cannot continually allow folks to show up, make a statement, not justify it, but continue making the statement because of the fact that we have folks who are susceptible to misinformation, to lies, and just flat out duplicity. All right. I am going to show you guys how to go about looking at some of the news that comes out of here. I may have done it before, but I am most sure positive that I am going to do this here when we finish this last article. All right. Bear with me. We're just about there. All right. Here is my last honorable mention. Now, I bring this back up again because this is what Fantastic and I went around with for a quick second regarding Joe Biden supposedly taking all these bribes. Oh, yeah, Hunter Biden and Burisma. Yeah, they've been taking bribes for years. And I told Fantastic, no, they had not been taking bribes for years. Matter of fact, this is the information I believe I provided in a link in the chat. Now, let me make one statement here. So, for our conversation that Fatty and I had, I'm going to stop dropping billions and billions of links upon you guys all at the same time because clearly nobody is reading them, with the exception of one or two folks down there. So I may do a slow, more gradual release, but anytime there's misinformation afoot, I'm going to go ahead and answer it either directly on the panel if I happen to jump up for a minute, or in the manner that I'm doing right now, which is through my own separate feed, which gives me a little more leeway to present additional information. So getting back to it, we see we have another bona fide fact checker here, which is Reuters. Ex-FBI informant who fabricated claims about Biden sentenced to 6 years. A former FBI informant who admitted to lying about U.S. President Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden's interactions with a Ukrainian energy company, which was Burisma, was sentenced to 6 years in prison on Wednesday, court records showed. And this is going back to January 8th of this year. Excuse me. Alexander Smirnov pleaded guilty last month to causing the creation of a false record after falsely telling his FBI handler that he had knowledge of bribes paid by executives at Burisma Holdings to Joe and Hunter Biden, according to court documents. Shit. Nothing else that needs to be said right there. There it is. Fact. It was all a lie from the very damn beginning. But wait, let me show you something. So for anyone sitting there like, oh, that's just a left-wing news, or why are you simply going to that agency? Who else has even said this? Okay, let me show you. Let's go ahead and get into verification techniques here. Now, let's take a look here. You can see that Reuters said, hey, it was a lie. But you know who else carried the story? NBC News, U.S. News and World Report, Politico, Voice of America, Los Angeles Daily News, PBS. Guess we have Al Arabia. We got into it. WEYE. Looks like there's some Michigan joint over there. Local news here. Cron 4, whoever they are. Former FBI informant pleads guilty to fabricating Biden claims. So how much more does anyone need to see? It was a lie from the very beginning. But you still will have people inside of the chats room panels will swear, oh, it was proven. It was proven. No, it wasn't proven. It was all pretty much propaganda, and it was a lie that was put to rest. All right. So those are my remaining two honorable mentions. Condoms being sent to Gaza and Joe Biden supposedly taking bribes from Burisma. Didn't happen. All right. So the door is shut on that. All lies brought up tonight have been debunked. So now let's go ahead and take a look at fact checking. So you guys have seen Reuters pop up a lot here. So the question most folks will be asking, so how do you know that Reuters is uh, a news organization that can be trusted? So let's do this. We'll say Reuters.com. And I think I've done this before. Yep, but we'll just go ahead and do it again. We'll go to Media Bias Fact Check. Now we're going to come back and take a look at Media Bias Fact Check here in a moment, because Media Bias Fact Check is one of 3 sites that I will bounce information off to ensure there is a level of credibility to anyone whose story that I'm reading and I'm looking to make known to others. So bias and credibility. So as you can see right here, as I get rid of pop-ups, Reuters is seated firmly in the middle, being least biased. And when it comes to factual reporting, there are 6 stages or 6 levels here on the media bias site, ranging from very high all the way down to very low. Very high, high, mostly factual, mixed, low, and very low. Just to let people know that once information starts getting into the mixed arena, excuse me, arena, depending upon how bad the sourcing is, you will see questionable sources listed below. But if nothing is questionable about what you're doing, you're also going to be listed as whether or not you're going to be left biased, right biased, or least biased. And right now, least biased could be taken as being right in the middle. Now, also to add here, from high to very high, depending upon, again, where people rank, you'll find that fact checks are rarely found to have been failed. So again, going back to this, Reuters is listed as being very high on factual reporting. Overall, we rate Reuters least biased based on objective reporting and very high for factual reporting due to proper sourcing of information with minimal bias and a clean fact check record. Of course, here's the bias rating. Here's your factual reporting. But the main thing that I want everyone to focus on is the credibility rating. And it says that they have high credibility. Now, if we scroll down a little bit further, you can see history, you can see the funding that comes into place. You can get information also about the analysis bias. But ideally, here's what we want to be focusing on. And we can see they have no fact checks. And also, as I said about Reuters, they are a certified international fact checking network fact checker. So this is a big deal. That means that these folks are considered to be golden when it comes to sourcing information on whether or not it's true or false. So anyone listed here as being a certified IFC and fact checker, all right, that is big brag, as the kids would say. So again, we see that Reuters is listed as being least biased with media bias and fact checks. So let's step back out and let's make a change. What if we went to one of the other remaining 3 sites, or 2 sites in this instance? All sides, media bias. All right, so here's all sides, and let's see what Reuters has to say. Here we go. We see, excuse me, I'm sorry. Let's see what all sides has to say about Reuters. And once again, you see that they have hit right in the center. All sides has medium confidence in this bias rating. Now, I will say, as I said in the first video that I did showing folks how to go about their fact checking, that you're going to have some disparity between the 3 sites. They're still well within the margin of error. And then there are some that are just completely on the outskirts. And I'll show you this when we start looking at the news organizations and the articles that they submit, and we look at them for accuracy. But as of right now, recognize that Reuters is also being listed in the center. Now, what does the center reading mean on all sides? Sources with all sides media bias rating of center either do not show much predictable media bias, display a balance for articles with left and right biases, or equally balanced left and right perspectives. Here's one thing that I noticed that only all sides present. Center does not mean better. A center media bias rating does not necessarily mean a source is totally unbiased, neutral, perfectly reasonable, or credible. just as left and right doesn't necessarily mean extreme, wrong, unreasonable, or not credible. All sides encourages people to read outlets across the political spectrum, as does all fact checkers. But basically, what they're saying here is that even center could be considered to be a bias. But center is still the best place to be, meaning that there's no favoritism for left or right. Let me bring that back up here. Oops. All right, so this is the portion that I just read out. So again, we're 2 for 2 with Reuters being right in the middle. So a third site that I like to use is Ad Fontes Media. All right, we take a look down. Reuters is listed as being right in the middle. And the reliability is a 45.18 on their scale. I don't believe I did a lot here as far as the scaling, did I? We'll go back to all sides in just a second. But just take a look right now here that the overall score that they gave them for reliability was 45.18 out of a possible, I think it's either 60 or 65 on the scale that Ad Fontes used. So let's do this. Let's go to the media bias chart. Now, I showed this in the previous video that I did, but we'll do it again. Now, if you look over here to the left, you can see what options that we have to display if we want to verify credibility. Websites, articles, TV, video, podcasts, and audio. Now, I can easily remove all of these. Now, in certain instances, depending upon the news agency, sometimes I can type in a news agency and I can get feedback, and they will actually display where this particular news agency lies on the graph here. Or the other option is that it comes back and you have to pay money for additional information. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. But there's still a way that we can find out where our targets sit. So remember now, I said that Reuters is about 45.18. So that means they're sitting right in between this area, between 40 and 48. Mix of fact reporting and analysis, or simple fact reporting. Let's see what happens. PUT Reuters. We go world news. Ah, just as expected, I have to pay an upgrade to get that information. But you know what? Do I really need to? No, I do not. So what I can do instead is if I click inside of this graph, and also remember, Reuters is supposed to be middle of balanced bias. If I click inside of here, check it out. I can expand the listings. And from doing so, I can now take it upon myself to seek out what I'm after, which is Reuters. And there it is. Once again, we see that 45.18 is reliability, and the bias is a negative 120. So if you're wondering where does the bias come from, take a look at the bottom here. We have political bias going to the right or to the left. So obviously, if we get to the edges, we have gone too far. That is extreme. Up at the top, let's go from left to right. Oh, by the way, the actual reliability rating goes from 0 all the way up to 64. Now, from left to right, we have most extreme left, hyperpartisan left, strong left, skews left, and then we have middle. All right, so this is where Reuters is located, right in the middle at 45.18. But as we go further over, we have skews right, which would be like a lean right or a lean left. Strong right, hyperpartisan right, and then most extreme right. So as we see here on the corners, that's where we're bordering to where folks are extreme. Now, depending upon the news, or as you were, depending upon the agency for fact checking that you go to, there may be one or two additional options that are part of the scale, or there may be two less. But just understand that middle seems to be the most consistent one across each of the three sites that I'm utilizing right now. So let's just close that out and we'll go backwards. And now let's go to all sides. Well, actually, I believe we've done all sides, but I don't think I focused too much on the actual scale. So let's just go back real fast. Now, the scale that's used over here for all sides, you see that there's your center, and then you have your lean left, lean right, but you have a -1 through 6, meaning that if you hit all the way over -6, you are extreme left. If you hit all the way on the right, you are extreme right. So, generally speaking, lean left and lean right is where you want to be. Also, take notice that I mentioned that depending upon the scale you use, there may be two more additional options that you saw at Ad Fontes, which is skew right and hyperpartisan right, excuse me, skew right, hyperpartisan right, skew left, hyperpartisan left. But it's real basic right here. We have 2, 3, 5 choices in total. So each site is going to vary on how they grade and scale the articles or the organizations regarding the journalism. You know, we're already over an hour, but let's go ahead and just make this fun. Let's do one, let's do a couple more here. So I know folks are burst to know what's Fox News like. So with Fox News, we'll go with all sides. Oh, and here is what we normally get from their opinion side, which is where all the money comes in for Fox News. So Fox News shows up on all sides as being on the right at 4 out of 6. All right, that's deep enough to say, hey, this is going to be problematic. All sides has low or initial confidence in this bias rating. So, what a right rating means. Sources with all sides media bias rating of right display media bias in ways that strongly align with conservative, traditional, or right-wing thought and or policy agendas. A right bias is the most conservative rating on the political spectrum. So we go back, what is the confidence level? And again, it states that there is low or initial confidence. All right, so that's all sides. How about Ad Fontes? All right, skews right. Reliability and generally reliable analysis or other issues. So the reliability they have for them is 35.38 and a bias of 11. Now they have they have a general news site and they also have the website. Back up here for a second, see what we're looking at. Okay, yeah, there's the rundown. Here's the also, excuse me, here's also a prime time bias as well. Let's click on this one, see what we get. Whoa. All right, we've gone a little bit further right. So Fox News prime time, I think we're looking at the website. Prime time is the one that we'd be looking at. We're talking about Jesse Waters, Greg Gutfield, Brett Baer, I think Laura Ingraham as well. But we can see that we saw the reliability rating drop a couple of points. And notice that the bias is up high. So let's look for Fox News prime time, shall we? So we'll go to media bias chart. We'll go to interactive. And before I make this mistake again, what was that? Hyperpartisan right. All right, so here we are in hyperpartisan right. So that means if we click in here, You should be looking for Fox Prime Time. Now, one thing I want people to keep in mind here is that occasionally you have one or two agencies that's listed that you don't find in here, but that doesn't mean that the rating isn't true or not. It just happens to mean that they probably didn't have time to add them to the mix. So again, we're over in the hyperpartisan right here, and we don't see Fox Prime Time, but that's okay because we already know what their grade was, 28.14. So let's just scroll this back down, and we can see that 28 is in between 24 and 32, which means that there's opinion or wide variation in reliability. All right, so again, this is the news value and reliability scale that we're viewing right now. So the 28 means that there's opinion and a wide variation in reliability. Okay, so a little bit skewed here, but nonetheless, they are a little bit higher on the scale than some of you more partisan and just ultra right wing, such as OAN. And we'll take a look at them next. Also, I think it was what 18.1 or so of the skew, but notice that we are way over here to the right. We're not all the way to extreme yet, but we are on our way with Fox Prime Time. So again, notice folks, I'm just demonstrating a fast way on how you can utilize the three sites that I provided if you want to verify where the level of accuracy is in the journalism that you're reading. So you can't do Fox News without doing MSNBC now, can you? So from one side to the other. So we'll start with MSNBC on Ad Fontes. And the rating we have for MSNBC, strong left. And the reliability, and generally reliable analysis or other issues. Notice that they are rated with a 34.57 and their bias is 1395, which means they're headed over to the hyperpartisan area, but they haven't touched that as of yet because they're sitting here at strong left. So we go to the media bias chart, 7 C. And it was stated that they are a strong left. We should find them over here somewhere. So we'll go ahead and start scrolling in. Let's see what we can find. There we go. MSNBC. 34.57 for the reliability and 1395 for the bias. So let's go ahead and scroll this back down here. Let me do this. Cursor. 34.76. So we look at 32 to 40, analysis of wide variation in reliability. So there's some improvement. They're in that sweet spot that you want to call yourself about average or a better than average, so to speak. Because 2 points below here, a little bit further, you've got opinion or wide variation in reliability, whereas just above 32, analysis or wide variation in reliability. So it fares a little bit better for you. So we'll close that and let's go ahead and step back. And now let's go to all sides. And we see that they are rated as being left at 3 or negative 3.7. Here as well, we see that they are left. Now recall, if they were on a site such as Ad Fontes, we saw that they were a strong left. So we have a couple of additional ratings here that are not a part of all sides. So this is the best you're going to get here. But notice that it says that there is median confidence in their rating. So what does the left rating mean? Sources with all sides media bias rating on left display media bias in ways that strongly align with liberal, progressive, or left-wing thought and or policy agendas. This is our most liberal rating on the political spectrum. So rather than drifting back a little bit down further for the confidence level, we can see that the confidence level right here is medium. So we'll take one last step back. Now let's go back to media bias fact check. So what is the credibility? Well, you saw that it was left. All right, so we were left on Ad Fontes. I think they were strong left. They were just a plain left on all sides. And you see we've gone from left center to left right here. So if we look at the factual reporting, we're down to mixed. Now notice we've got a left bias here, but we don't see questionable. Now keep in mind, I just realized we didn't do Fox News. I left that for last. All right, so these media sources are moderately to strongly biased towards liberal causes through story selection and or political affiliation. They may utilize strong loaded words, wording that attempts to influence an audience by using appeal to emotion or stereotypes, publish misleading reports, and omit information reporting that may damage liberal causes. Some sources in this category may be untrustworthy, and you get a listing. Now, if I didn't mention this before, whether it's center, least bias, right, center, right, they're going to list other sources that pertain to whatever bias is listed up above. Overall, we rate MSNBC left bias based on story selection that consistently favors the establishment left. We also rate them mixed for factual reporting due to news hosts and the website producing 3 pants on fire claims. So here's our detailed report. You see that there's the left bias, as factual reporting is mixed, but when it comes down to credibility, they get a medium credibility. So let's go a little bit further and let's look at what we have for fact checks. All right, you see we've got a few failed fact checks here. False, false, pants on fire, false, false, false. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, so as of 2024, MSNBC has 7 failed fact checks. So again, we can see that they are rated left. So they've stayed consistent within that margin of error that I spoke of. So we can see that MSNBC is clearly left leaning. So they stayed right in that area. Nothing is surprising, but their rating is mixed when it comes to their factual reporting. So we'll step back here, and I believe this is what I did not do. I think I did Fox News for Fontes Media and also for All Sides, but I don't think I did it for Media Bias. So what we'll do here, let's just run through one more time, just in case people have forgotten. So again, Fox News, Ad Fontes Media. So we saw the prime time was 28.72. Now remember now, that was low on the scale. If you need to recall what it was, just go ahead and back the video up or do the same searching that I'm doing right now. All right, so there's Fox News for All Sides. Again, they're listed as a 4, which is on the right, low or initial confidence. Now, what do you believe you're going to see here for media bias fact check? I keep talking about a margin for error, but I also stated earlier that there is some discrepancy that you may find between these 3 sites. Now, remember, these are not the only 3. but there is a bit of a discrepancy depending upon which news agencies that you are reviewing. So we are looking at Fox News. We're getting a right rating from them as well. But now we see that we have we have a factual reporting of mixed. But notice here, we've got questionable sources. Now, on all sides, they claim it was low, right? So, questionable source, this more or less coincides with two of the three agencies, which means that Fox News is not a reliable source of information. A questionable source exhibits one or more of the following: extreme bias, consistent promotion of propaganda, conspiracies, poor or no sourcing to credible information, a complete lack of transparency, and or is fake news. Fake news is the deliberate attempt to publish hoaxes and or disinformation for profit or influence. Sources listed in the questionable category may be very untrustworthy and should be fact checked on a per article basis. Please note sources on this list are not considered fake news unless specifically written in the reasoning section for that source. And you have a link to take you to questionable sources. So overall, we rate Fox News right bias based on editorial positions that align with the right and questionable due to the promotion of propaganda, conspiracy theories, pseudoscience, the use of poor sources, and numerous false claims and failed fact checks. Straight news reporting from beat reporters is generally fact based and accurate, which earns them a mixed factual rating. So recall before where I said that a rating of mixed may sometimes bring in a questionable sources rating. Now we saw with MSNBC that they were listed as being mixed, but their sources were not questionable. They were still considered to be least biased. But as you can see with Fox News, it is extremely questionable because we've seen the conspiracy that comes out of Fox News, whether it be vaccines, whether it be masking, whether it be COVID. We've seen all that information that is verified here in our sources. So there's nothing I'm saying here that is false. Facts do not choose sides. So again, let's take a look at this detailed report. Questionable reasoning, conspiracy theories, pseudoscience, propaganda, poor sources, numerous failed fact checks. So you can see that they pretty much pegged out on the scale. The reporting was listed as mixed, but here's the big deal: credibility, low. So also, let's take a ride down and see what we have for our fact checking. So we got pants on fire, pants on fire, pants on fire, false, pants on fire, false, false, mostly false. One, two, three. Damn, they had four pants on fire. All right, so that should tell you that anytime you're listening to anyone making statements, you probably want to ask them, who did you get your information from? All right, folks, we've run long and wide again. We're about an hour and a half into this, but sometimes you need to do this. So, again, overall, as I said before, fact checking is going to have to be something that we lean into going forward. Again, Fatty's show was a good show as always, but we have people who will drift by and leave information that they don't substantiate that is left for others to supposedly do their own research. But if you don't know how to do proper research, what happens? You end up getting on that misinformation train. So I'm hoping here that everyone has been able to once again take a look at the information that I provided, and you'll be able to assess for yourself what is and is not factual information. All right, so before we get out of here, let me make one last statement. Before I do, Hassan, thanks for showing up, man. You kind of caught us at the back end, literally. But if you want to go ahead and check the replay, I'm sure you might find something useful from this. So, as I was saying, find somebody who knows somebody to tell somebody about what's going on over here. If you like it, let me know. Share it if you do. And subscribe if this is what you're looking for. So, again, folks, appreciate you for showing up. Thank you for those who are just now tapping in. But if you can't catch anything right now, by all means, go ahead, check the replay. So I thank everyone for joining for the conversation. And I will see you next time. John Henry out.